welcome to Gamification on JCPS Digital Learning Live. I am Matt Bolka of Digital Innovation, and I am super excited to be on this episode to celebrate our remarkable educators across JCPS. Today, I am also joined by our Digital Innovation leader, Jim Unger. How are you guys doing today? Good? Okay. And let me pull up the screen. Also joining us today is Scott Brewer from the Phoenix School of Discovery. I will be running the control room today with Jim and taking questions from the YouTube live chat. Please make sure you drop in there, introduce yourself, and let us know what school or district office you are from. If you don't have the chat capability, make sure you log into YouTube, and while you're there, check the subscribe button so you can continue learning with us. And Mr. Brewer, I'm going to let you take it away.
Thanks, Matt. All right, so today we're going to talk about a couple different things. We're going to talk about what gamification is, what gamification isn't. It's been a new buzzword for what feels like long enough for a thing to no longer be a new buzzword. But we've been trying to do different kinds of gamification at Phoenix for a number of years now. I'm going to go ahead and switch over to a presentation. Okay, good. All right. Well, so today we're going to talk a little bit about what gamification is and what it isn't. It's a word that gets thrown around a lot in educational design circles, and it's a really powerful concept that is not just classroom management, but also curricular design. And I think that the curricular design aspect of it kind of gets lost in the discussion now and then. And I want to focus in on that after we get rid of a couple misconceptions first. So when I think of what gamification is, I think of it's a system of classroom management that you're employing in your class. It's going to be highly visual, but it's also going to respond to students as players, like a game. You're using game design. You're using game design thought processes in your classroom and in your pedagogy and in your curriculum. So you're giving kids as much agency as you feasibly can without losing control of the room. So you're kind of mediating their control. So if you were to break this down into specific parts, for something to be truly gamified, kids would need to have a sense of control over some aspect of the course or classroom. They need to feel a sense of progression that's visually represented. And that's the thing that kind of always shows up when we're trying to gamify. And we need a space where students may or may not compete directly with one another, and a structure where students feel that they are the subject of learning and they're taking action and producing the learning themselves. And they're not simply the object of what's being measured. And if you're a big nerd like me, then you know that that's Paulo Freire, but that's neither here nor there. A couple places that you could also go after this, if you hear some things in this presentation that you're really interested in. Jane McGonigal wrote an awesome book called Reality is Broken, and she kind of kicked off the big wave of gamification. And it's all about how games engage us and make us interested and hold our attention. And then Scott Herbert more recently did a TED Talk on gamification, and it was an awesome discussion about why you should try to use more game mechanics in your classroom and how they can pump up engagement in your room. And he talks about how education has an engagement problem, and his TED Talk is all about that. And then that last link there for Classcraft is if at the end of all this, you're like, well, it all sounds really cool, Mr. Brewer, but I don't know if I'm ready to get knee deep in Excel sheets just this second. So, but I would like to do something along the lines of gamification. Well, Classcraft is a really powerful tool for getting your feet wet in this world of student agency and control in your classroom. And we have a teacher here at Phoenix, Mr. Harden, who uses Classcraft in his room, and he could probably answer your questions as well if you get into that. So first, let's talk about what gamification isn't. And a lot of times I'll see on Twitter or on Tumblr or Pinterest, and people will be pursuing gamification. And as they're starting out, a lot of people will go through kind of these steps towards gamifying. And it's important for your classroom, if you want to gamify, to not stop here. These are all things that you can do in your class that aren't necessarily bad, but they're not fully gamifying a course. So the first misconception is the student gamification is students playing games in the classroom as a method of content presentation, which has the word game in it, and I think that's where the confusion comes. The second common misconception is a point collection or tracking system, but with no student input or control structures. So I'm going to kind of explain how that's different also. And then the third common misconception is a behavioral tracking system, but again, without student agency or control. So the first one for gaming in the classroom, that could be really awesome. And we've seen around the district some really cool things done with Minecraft in the classroom. And while that is an amazing way to present content and just an absolutely fascinating way to get kids involved in texts and three-dimensional representations of texts, it's not in itself gamification. The next one is this point collection or tracking system, but with no student import or control structure. So it looks really good on the wall, but if students don't gain more control over your curriculum, over their space through interacting with the chart, then it's not true gamification. It's more of a tracking structure or just a visualizer of their success. That's not bad, though. You can run a visualizer of success in your classroom, and it can be really a powerful classroom management tool, especially in the right context, especially for younger kids. Oh, and here, I'm going to read a little bit off this also. So there appear to be fail and success states because some kids are red and some kids are green. But in reality, there's only the fail state of not being recognized and the success state of the teacher's basic assumption that you will do the work and be green. Green is what you want everyone to be. So really, you can only fail this kind of thing. You can't really succeed because you want all the kids to be green. So there's less game there. And then the last one is the behavioral tracking system without student agency. And that's very similar to the previous one, which is more of an academic system. And the problem with a behavioral system is, I think, even worse, especially at higher educational levels, because now, I mean, these aren't my students, obviously. I just pulled this from Pinterest. But poor Brody, right? I mean, what's up with Brody? And you know that Stacy and Yesenia and Levi were having rough days too, and Michael. So you can kind of at a glance know who's struggling, which isn't ideal. It's not ideal for a game, and it's not ideal for equity. All right. So I kind of mentioned it while we were going through them. All of these misconceptions are used in classrooms, and they're used not necessarily as gamification, but they're used as classroom management techniques. And they get mixed results depending on the teacher and the students. And some of them are super effective methods of managing your class at different contexts. If I was running a third grade classroom, I would absolutely have a color sheet to track students' behaviors because it's best practice there. In an 11th and 12th grade class, like where I teach, I needed to look different, and it needs to function differently for it to be equitable for my kids. So what we're going to talk about today, now that we've kind of gotten some misconceptions out of the way, is the description from the beginning of this presentation. What is gamification like as a whole? All right. And when we're talking about that, there really are two things that we can talk about at JCPS: choice-based curriculum and student-determined pathing, and equitable data presentation. So these are the two kind of hard rocks of adopting gamification in your class. The choice-based curriculum and pathing, so we kind of do that as a district when we talk about career pathways, and we set up entire schools for students to pursue their careers in, and they pick and choose schools and they find that path for themselves. And as a district, we're getting better and better every year about saying to a kid, hey, you already know what you want to do, or you have an inkling of what you'd like to pursue. Let's prop you up and support you in that pursuit. And we're already doing that in a large structural way. I'm going to kind of argue that you could do that in your class too. The second thing that we need to talk about is equitable data presentation. And it's this kind of ongoing discussion, and where as we get better at using visuals to show students where they're at, we're running into problems with FERPA law and compliance. And it's important that a student's name not be used as on a visual that's in your classroom. So first, let's talk a little bit about that student-based, choice-based curriculum and student-determined pathing. So for this, I think that there's kind of two ways you can break this down also. How can you implement choice-based curriculum without losing coherence in your daily class structures? Like, how can you say to 28 to 32 kids, I want each of you to pursue a path that may be different from each other without going crazy yourself and pulling out your hair? And the second question is, how can you implement choice-based curriculum while sticking to those high standards for students, regardless of their choices? So how can I hold you all to a high standard? And how can all those standards meet you individually? That sounds like an impossible task, but I don't think it is, because I got to do it at Phoenix. And then the second part of this is, of course, making sure that our visual trackers are not giving away student information to anyone who walks through your class. So how can we show our students progress in those individual paths and celebrate them without breaking FERPA law and showing names or recognizable characteristics and data? And how can we gamify past just tracking systems and progress monitoring sheets? So how can we give kids more control over your content? All right, so at Phoenix, we found a lot of different answers to these questions in a lot of different ways. I mentioned Mr. Harden before with his Realm of Masters and his math class, where students design their own family shields and they purchase and they run a class economy. We also have Mr. Walker here, who's the band teacher, who runs a gamified course using Disney World maps, and he uses Blackboard technology to allow students to work through those maps in Disney. And Ms. Sharp's 9th and 10th grade science class, they have an XP system similar to mine. XP stands for experience points. And students are earning XP and leveling up their X-Men mutants. So there's lots of different flavors. We also had a teacher who used to work here named Mr. Blasi, who's now at DOS, and he ran a system that allowed students to get more control over a large map, and they kind of got area as they leveled up, and they could sort of expand the borders of their town and compete with other people for space. And that was an art class. There's a lot of really different mechanics that you can introduce into your classroom. A lot of it depends on what your comfort is with your content and what your comfort is with different kinds of game mechanics. All right, so how can you do it? The first step is really, really enjoying your own content and knowing your standards at a deep level. You can't design a large number of paths within your classroom without being very comfortable with the standards that you're teaching. So I absolutely wouldn't recommend starting off if this is your first or second year teaching in JCPS. I wouldn't recommend trying to gamify your course to a heavy degree starting out. I think this is really the sort of thing that you should pursue once you gain a lot of comfort with your standards and with your student body, and you kind of know what their interests are. With your passion and your standards knowledge, you're going to be able to do a lot of really cool things. And I want to show you in just a second how that worked in my class. Second has passed. Here's how it worked in the class. So for my students, I put together 10 different career pathways that they can work through while proving mastery over the Anchor English standards. I did that. I put that together. I started putting it together about 6 years ago. It's taken the better part of the 6 years to get to where it is today. Once the KAS standards shifted over the last year, I had to do some modifications. But because there was a lot of overlap in English between the new KAS standards and the past Common Core standards, it wasn't as bad as I thought it was going to be when I saw that there was a standard shift coming. So I'm going to pop us out of this for a second and kind of talk you through what the experience of a student is in the class. So this is the site that students access. They go in here and they're going to choose among those 10 different career paths to show mastery of the standards, the Anchor standards for English for 11th and 12th grade. So I'm going to go ahead and click on the keys, which will take me to the different paths. And the gifts are not necessary, but welcome. So every couple weeks, students are required to complete a key project in class. And those key projects are aligned to a career path that they have chosen. Now, they're not locked into a career path. They can shift as their interests change. So let's go and pull up the artist. So this is a student who is interested in pursuing some kind of visual arts or art history as a career. And the other paths are poetry and language. They have a catch-all for cool projects that students come up with that I can't quite fit somewhere else. Also business. The journalist is journalism and law. The fittest is sports and medicine. And these kind of cheesy terms, they're not necessary per se. You could be more serious in your terminology, but I found that when you're trying to do narrative structures like Find Your Path or the more epic sounding you can make it, it's kind of like the spoonful of sugar that helps the medicine go down. So the mentor is education and psychology. The gamer is, of course, gaming and game design. Big hit here. The musician is music production and sound. And Old Glory is active military and military history. There's a little bit of overlap between Old Glory and the Journals for Law. That's just because I haven't had a ton of students go through this. And then the author is writing for publication, for the stage, and for the page. So let's go to the artist for a second. All right, and it has its little cheesy blurb up here about how cool you are for being interested in this path. But when we scroll down, we have linked to the 10 anchor standards for ELA 11th and 12th. These are all reading literature projects. And inside of each of these reading literature projects, all of them are different. They'll be meeting those first 3 anchor standards for reading and literature. And there's a lot of different options that they have. So they could be making a diorama and explaining that diorama using a piece of literature that we're reading as a class. And each one of these is broken up into beginner to mastery. And their students are completing these projects on a 2-week schedule. Sorry, I'm kind of reading and talking at the same time. So let me go back for a second.
So, Mr. Brewer, does the student have to complete all of them bronze through master or just one of them?
So the student will need to show mastery. Thank you for a good question. So the student will need to show mastery in reading standard 1 and reading standard 2 and reading standard 3. So I'm an artist student and I really like this project and I really don't want to do other projects, but I like this one. So I can get RL1, RL2, and RL3 all in this project. And I can show that I've completed those standards in this specific project. Now, all of these projects also make great backpack items. So they're going to go into this project and they might stay here and work all the way through bronze to master, to answer your question. Sorry. They might stay here, but they might just get standard 1 and move on to a different project to get standard 2. I don't hold them to stick in the same project all the way to master, because the primary goal of my gamified course is increasing a student's sense of agency in the room, both academically and structurally. Academically, I want you to feel like we are in your wheelhouse when we are writing on projects. You are not completing the same project as everyone else in the room. And in fact, when I'm running this, I tell them, if you're doing the same thing as your neighbor, then one of you isn't doing what you want to do. You need to find a project specific to your goals and your interests, and what you want to do after school. Because I'm working with 11th and 12th graders, and I mean, some of my students are co-oping and working with UPS, and a lot of my students have jobs, and they're already in the workforce kind of figuring out, what do I want to do and what do I not want to do after I graduate? So we can look at another one. So this is for Vincent van Gogh, and you're using the work of Vincent van Gogh as your literature, and you're responding to his work as literature. So this is a good example, because let's say you did the other project for your reading literature 1 anchor standard. Well, now you're going to start at reading literature 2, themes and ideas, and you're going to prove that by completing this pass-fail rubric. Now, the other English teachers in the audience are cringing every time I say pass-fail rubric. I do have 4 and 5 part rubrics for the large research essays that we do during the year, and for bigger projects that we do as a whole class. This is not a system that replaces whole class instruction. It's a system that allows students to have some space in the room that is wholly theirs, but in my context. It's their project, it's their passion, but it's my standards. So it gives them space to have agency, and it makes the project far more meaningful. And I find that I have much higher engagement when I run this system than when I don't. All right, we'll pop back out a little bit and talk about structure. Do you guys have any other questions that you can think of about how that works?
How long? I mean, we saw I don't know how many different projects just for standards 1 through 3 right there. How long did it take you to develop all of this?
So it's taken me. So I'm an 8th year teacher, so I'm still a young in education. It took me probably the better part of 3 of those 8 years to put this together. The first 4 years teaching, I had a few of these, and I used paper slips on a wall. And I had some QR codes that went to a Google Docs for them to do this. I didn't put together the website until I think year 4 rolled around, and I thought that there'd be a better way to consolidate all these different paths so that students could kind of easily see what other people are working on, and jump ship from one path to the other if they wanted to. Those first couple of years, I only had probably 10 or 20 optional assignments, and back then they were optioned assignments, not key projects. And phrasing is important when you're gamifying because you're kind of giving them that spoonful of sugar. It took time. It took a good 3 years to put together the website. Yeah. Now, each one of these projects, though, because I really like my content and I'm really a huge fan of, I'm a big standards nerd. So putting together one of these projects takes anywhere from 15 to 20 minutes when a kid comes to me with an idea. Now, one of the cooler things about running your class like this is a large number of these were student concepts that they just asked me, hey, would there be a way for you to grade me if I did this? Could you grade me if I did this? And it then becomes my job as the holder of standards and as the person who understands the benchmark that I need them to hit to say, yeah, I can find a way for the benchmark to meet you in your home. And I think that that's a big part of why I didn't get burnt out putting this together, and I'm still not burnt out adding projects to it when students ask, because it's like I'm paid as an employee of JCPS to like know the standards and present the standards and assist students in getting the mastery, and why am I treating them all as one homunculus kid versus saying to each individual person that just as important as I am in the classroom and you're arguably more. I'm already in my career. I already know what I'm going to do. You're the unknown commodity. Why shouldn't I design my classroom around the unknown commodity of your future? So this is that. All right, I'm going to pop back into. Do you have any other questions about how it works?
No, I'm just amazed. I'm enthralled. I do a lot of gamification in my class as well, and a lot of self-driven and self-paced, and it's incredible the amount of work that you've done here. And to have the students come up with these assignments as well is just awesome.
I love that too. The other thing that tells me when they do that is that not only are they engaging with my content, but they're pursuing the standard in their context. So like I can put these together all day long and geek out and go on Pinterest and you'll find some new way to present a standard. But when they bring it to me, that really just makes me feel excited and it lights me up. And I really want to run out and like pull up Weebly and start throwing together a new one for them right that minute, because that's when they're really pursuing that standard and they're really pursuing that academic growth on their own. Yeah, no, I really dig it. It's been a lot of fun. It's been a lot of fun to put together. And I think that if you're watching this and you're thinking to yourself, how am I gonna come up? I'm not gonna come up with 10 career paths. I'm not gonna do all this. This is ridiculous. I think that, when I started this years back, when I started this a couple years ago, I had the artist and I had the author and I had the gamer, because I wasn't a fool, so I knew I needed to have the gamer in 2015. So I had the artist, the author, and the gamer, and the other paths kind of grew out of students, individuals who said, "Mr. Brewer, I'm not an author. I know you're an English teacher, but I'm not an author. I'm into sports." So then the fittest pops up. Or Mr. Brewer, I don't really like, I'm not really big into art. I don't like gaming, but man, do I love music. Man, do I love have you heard this new album with Kendrick Lamar, Mr. Brewer? And is there something I could write about that? And yeah, there is. So the musician pops up, and suddenly you have students who are doing sound production and putting together backbeats and explaining how they're gonna get seen and writing that plan out. That's a lot of fun. I could geek out about that all day, but I do want to talk about a little bit more about how the day-to-day runs, because it's easy to look at that and say that's a really complicated thing, and that meets students where they're at. But how is that going to fit into a day where I gotta teach this book, Mr. Brewer? I gotta teach this book, and I gotta get these kids through this book, and we got to do a couple of different big research projects, and I'm going to follow the map. And how am I going to follow the map for my content and do this kind of thing? Well, first off, you're going to do this not during the school year. You're probably going to do most of the planning outside of school. And I know that's again one of those things that you hear as a teacher and like, well, now I've done. But it's exciting and it's fun, and when the kids come to you and they own it, I don't know. That's just it makes every other part of the class easier to do.
Sorry to interrupt you. One of the things I've always found, and I did a lot of that as well, I front loaded a lot of my work. I did a lot of work over the summer, and I found that throughout the school year, it made my load less. Like it was easier to do the day to day because I did all that work beforehand.
Yeah, totally. And that's and I think that's in a nutshell. If I could package that exactly, that's exactly why I think that gamification should catch on, because in the words of the guy whose TED Talk I had at the beginning of the play, we have an engagement problem in education. That's our biggest problem, is that why does this matter to me? And when students pull this out in our classroom, it's because this isn't boring. And this knows me, and this is tailored to my every need. And it's not you, Mr. Brewer, it's this. And if this thing were as rare as worksheets, then no one would have a cell phone. But yeah, we're not competing with television anymore. We're competing with social media. And to compete with social media, we need to start tailoring our lessons. All right, I'm going to pop back into the present. So I'm going to talk to you a little bit about how the day would run in a class like that, because it looks prohibitive, but it's not. And it's exciting, and it's a lot of fun. You got my slides now?
Yeah, they're there.
All right, good deal. So the way that this runs, this is a timer. If you're in a middle school classroom or earlier, you're probably familiar with this kind of thing. This is a timer that kind of saved my life and saved the workflow in the classroom when I ran this system. So this is a 4-station class. Students are going to choose between 3 different stations after we do a class reading for 15 minutes every day. So this does not remove direct instruction. This is not me saying don't do direct instruction at all. There's still direct instruction. This is going to supplement direct instruction with a space where students have higher agency. So the station structure produces different degrees of student agency inside the classroom. So I work with some defiant students, as well as students who have ASD, who are on the autism spectrum. And for the defiant students, giving them more control over their space, what station are you going to go to after we read together? What are you going to be working on today? And one of those stations is totally in your wheelhouse and totally aligned to your goals and interests. Now, grammar is going to be grammar, and close reading is going to be close reading. So I can't do much for you to make grammar super personalized, but we do use No Red Ink at Phoenix, and that does a great job of using student interests to construct the questions. So I love that because it does feel personalized. The close reading I use is Newsella, and that's not personalized so much as you can choose the Lexile level that you're most comfortable with while reading. So there's still a little bit of control there. The only station in my entire class where you don't have a lot of control is where we do group reading. But I think that it's valuable for defiant students to have some space where they have to not have a lot of control and agency. Now, that's only 15 minutes a day, but I think that it's still valuable to build in some of that direct instruction. So what this did was it let us be light on our feet. So we can move through primary texts at that 15 minutes a day speed, work on specific reading and grammar skills, and it would give students that space to make those highly individualized projects that filled up their digital portfolios. And I had a digital portfolio defense at the end of senior years from the get-go called my last lecture project. And there are other teachers who do English in this district right now nodding out there going, oh yeah, last lecture. I remember that. That was a lot of fun. And they would use their key projects from their digital portfolios to defend their last lectures back in the day. And now it's their backpacks. So they're still able to produce really diverse, really personalized backpacks. All right, so how can you implement this while adhering to the high standards, regardless of their choices? So you need to build rubrics that require meeting the standard at a proficient level into your projects. So each rubric should be at that standard level when you write it. And for me, I'm lucky I'm an 11th and 12th, so there's not a lot of daylight between the 11th and 12th grade standards. And for some of the 12th grade standards, they're the same as the 11th grade standards for English. So for me, in English, it's an easier task than for year-specific contents like science or history, where each year the standards are vastly different. For a class like that, I would recommend only one or two paths. Just because the level of complexity for designing, if you have more than one prep and you have let's say you have civics in the morning and you have US history in the afternoon, and then you have another history course after that, prepping this kind of thing would almost be prohibitive if you're going to do more than two paths. But even two paths, giving kids some kind of choice and options is important and can help you out. And the other thing that you can do is teaching students to recognize that at-level work in their classroom and recognizing those standards in other people's work. So like Monday through Thursday, we would run this system, and we would have our group reading, and then we would go on to your 3 stations that you choose from. And I would actually let students even choose, if you wanted to, you could stay at grammar station on Monday, but you just need to do close reading and writing for Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday if you knock out all 3 of your grammars on Monday. And that kind of control over the structure in the class was also beneficial, especially with defiant students. Being able to say to them, I know you hate grammar, let's get it out of the way on Monday. And then being able to walk over to them during the station rotation period of my class and focus with them on the thing that they struggle with to get it out of the way. Oh man, that narrative versus, all right, everyone, it's time to do grammar as a group again. It's a completely different narrative because they've chosen to take the medicine versus it's time for your medicine again. It's a subtle but really important difference. So teaching students to recognize at-level work in your classroom is important. And let's get back. I'm going to get off that now, unless you guys have any other questions about kind of the student agency or control part of this.
Nope, none from me.
All right. So let's get back over into how you visualize and how you show students progress. It's really important to not have students' names on things in your classroom, because when people walk through, they can see those names and they can recognize who does what. If you're displaying something in the front of a building, it's a little bit different because permissions and administrative rights to display things are a little bit different than you in your classroom. But having students' names present is potentially dangerous. It's a potential pitfall. So the method that I'm currently running to avoid having student names present in my tracking data is a pictorial based. So the students know which picture is them, but they don't necessarily know which picture is other students. And this can be disaggregated from your alphabetical list to make it even harder for students to know who's who. This is the tracker that I currently use in my class. During the week, I do use a pseudo token system where I hand out magic cards to students who are on task and to students who ask good questions and to students who I'm happy to see because they've been out for a couple days, and to students who arrived to class on time for the first time this week, and to students, you get the idea. It's a form of positive behavioral feedback. Very class dojo. The only thing that is different for me in Classic Dojo in this regard is I use my own system and my own visual, and I have 2 classes competing against each other at all times for an average. And whichever class has the highest average on Thursday evening will get food on Friday, and that can be muffins or that can be cookies or donuts, depending on what time period of the day the class is. And so the class who wins will get food, and the class who loses will get a boost to the same average as the class who wins. So every week, Monday through Thursday, my students are competing to race each other to Thursday evening and have the highest score. And it's an average score, so it's a fair score even if I have some classes with a lot more students or fewer students. The way this screen works, the little green numbers are their raw XP or experience points. The little that's this here. The little blue numbers are their current total level, and the orange or the yellow numbers down here are quests that they may have completed, and those are student specific and that I assign. So like, let's say that you haven't been to school for a while. Your quest is going to be to get a list of things that you need to do to catch back up in other classes. Or let's say that you have missed a quiz, but you can make up that quiz. The quest may be take notes to prepare for the quiz and then show me those notes. So the quests are like slightly smaller than key projects and more moment to moment specific. But when you complete those, you'll get your gold point, your GP, if you will. If you're a big gamer, you'll get your gold point, and that will raise you a whole level. So it takes 10 XP to go up a level, for 32, 43, and it just takes one of these to go up a level. So when completing a couple quests can be a good way to get back in the game if you've been absent for a couple days. And we do struggle with some absences at our program. So that's a good way for students to kind of bump themselves back up. And it looks fancy, right? You just got some gold. So that's kind of the weekly tracking sheet that I use, which is pretty endemic to gamified courses, regardless of the level of complexity or the level of agency that kids are feeling in the other parts of the course. All right, so it is a tracking system. That is a tracking system. And I started out by saying, hey, tracking systems aren't gamifications on their own. So this is gamification. And it's gamification because by being able to choose your standards path, which is aligned to your career, students have content agency. Agency is required for something to be a game. You need to feel like you can play and have choice and pursue your own, using your own free will, some kind of path that is yours. Also, choosing your station during each daily station rotation gives students some classroom structure or management agency. That's super necessary for students who struggle with defiance. And I said I have defiant students as well as ASD students on the autism spectrum. For those students, sometimes my autistic students will come up with a weekly structure and they'll stick to it. And they'll have a structure that they design and that they like. And, I do grammar on Wednesdays because I like to do close reading on Mondays, and I like to do my key projects on Thursdays right before Friday comes around, and we do key project presentations, and I like to just knock them out that day, and I don't like to mix and match. So that kind of control over the space married to control over the content makes it so that students are generally really excited to be in the room because it's their room. And I kind of work here. So in the end, why should I think you should gamify? I think you should gamify if you're really excited about your content and you really feel comfortable with your standards and you're upset with student engagement in your classroom. I think you should gamify if engagement's your primary issue with your student body right now. I don't think you should gamify if it's your first or second year. At least not to a heavy degree. Maybe running some kind of visual tracker and running some kind of competition would be really appropriate. But the kind of curriculum manipulation that you'll need to do and be comfortable with to run a fully fledged game, probably I'm talking more to team leaders who are interested in changing the way that they track student progress and projects, like in a high school team, or people who are just really comfortable with your content and you feel like you're ready to start stepping out a little bit from the one project that we all do together in class. And did just this last little bit here. I found that at Phoenix with my students, the built-in agency and transparency of social expectations, like how you're going to get that magic card that gamification provides, has been extremely effective, not just in classroom management, but in getting students to buy in to their standards and to really be excited about coming into English and writing and researching and producing content. So thanks. Yeah, that's kind of all I got, unless you guys got some more questions. If you have any other questions about game design, if you'd like to spitball a game mechanic that you're thinking about implementing in your classroom, or if you just want to geek out about methods of increasing student agency and voice in your content, don't hesitate to reach out to me. I'm at john.brewer@jefferson.kyschools.us or Mr. Brewer English on Twitter. Or if you just really want to talk about Paulo Freire, because I'm on a Freire kick right now. So yeah, GLHF. Good luck, have fun.
Mr. Burr, would it be okay if we put a link to your Weebly website in the comments? That way people or the description of this video so people can go and check out your stuff?
Yeah, totally. It's kingdomandkeys.com. Or if you wanted the Weebly address, it's the Kingdom and the Keys, and then all the other Weebly stuff.
Awesome. Well, we really appreciate it. Man, I thought I was good at gamification until I watched this, and now I kind of feel bad about myself. This is just incredible, and we need you presenting at KISTI and everywhere we can get you because people need to see this. So it's truly, truly awesome.
Well, it's a lot of fun for me, and like honestly, it's fun for me because I like teaching. I really love teaching, and I get excited when they get excited, and they get excited when they're doing something that they're passionate about. And you know, I can be passionate about Macbeth all day long, and I can sell Macbeth all day long, but selling research papers requires someone to like research, and to like research, you have to have something that you want to research. So I love it. I can geek out about it.
Well, this is truly awesome. So thank you for joining us today. And all our viewers out there, thank you so much for tuning in. If you would like to stay connected to the JCPS digital learning work, you can receive on-demand video support by subscribing to our JCPS digital learning channel on YouTube. All you have to do is hit the subscribe button there. You can also follow along, contribute to the hashtags, hashtag JCPS backpack, hashtag we are JCPS, and hashtag JCPS dig in. And if you would like to, please follow at Mr. Brewer English on Twitter as well, because he is clearly doing some incredible things. So thank you all so much again for tuning in, and I hope you all have a great day.
Thanks, you too. See you, Mr. Balco.
Thanks.